you, Dr. Tao and Dr. Udiana. That was amazing. I'm so glad we were able to get through so many of those questions. That was awesome. Like they said, I'll put the link one more time in the chat just in case you missed it. So look for that in a second here. And now we're going to transition to our last session of the day. I am so excited for all of you to meet our amazing panel of medical student influencers. So if you are on the panel, you can go ahead and turn your camera on now. All of these students volunteered to participate in this panel today to give all of you the inside scoop about what medical school is really like. So just with the previous sessions, we're going to use the Q&A box. So go ahead and type your questions in there. Be mindful that these are medical students and not admissions professionals. So I think these questions will be a little bit more about kind of what medical school is like, the day-to-day life, things like that. If you have more admissions-oriented questions, I'll invite you to use the link in the chat. All right, so now I'm going to hand it off to our moderator, Dr. Dan Katz.
Hey everyone, good to see you all again, and thank you to our medical students for joining. Again, I'm Dan. I am a second year internal medicine resident, and I'll be moderating the panel. So I'll be looking for questions in the Q&A portion below. But first, again, I want to thank our medical students for joining us, and I'm going to go one by one, and you just introduce yourself if you can, and tell us what year you're in and maybe what specialty you're interested in. And the first person I see here is Angela.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. My name is Angela Rutkowski. I'm a rising third year. I'm at Rush in Chicago, and I'm currently interested in OBGYN or neurology, keeping an open mind. Definitely very excited for rotations.
Awesome. Next, I see Brooke.
Yeah, hey y'all, Brooklyn. I'm a fourth year medical student. Cannot believe it. So on edge with MASH next week. I'm in Texas, and I also am finishing up my MPH during medical school, so that might be relevant to someone. And I'm kind of revealing what I'm applying to soon, but it's more like primary care focus and trying to incorporate public health in my career.
Awesome. Next person I see is Zara.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm in South Florida. I'm a third year medical student, and I'm currently interested in emergency medicine, but it changes like every day. So stay tuned.
Fair. And the last person I see here is Kinza.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kinza. I'm a fourth year medical student. I'm actually here in Massachusetts, and I am applying psychiatry.
Awesome. So I see questions already starting to pour in, and I'm probably just going to pick on one person individually per question. That way we can get through as many questions as possible. And this session is going to go for about an hour. And so before we get started, though, I have a question that I'd want to ask somebody, and I'll ask you, Angela, if you can. The first question is, failure is a normal part of the process of becoming a physician. And everyone at some point in their path has sort of failed in becoming what they want to do, or whether it's tests or things in that journey. Can you talk about a time that you've had a failure or something that didn't go the way you were expecting it to, and how anybody could learn from an experience like that?
Yeah, happily will answer this question. I feel like failure is not something unknown to me. First off, I hate the word failure. I know that that's what's referred to, but I just see it as opportunity to, grow, make the most out of it. And it's just, yeah, I have a whole spiel about that. But basically it started as a sophomore in college. I got a C-. So I obviously was very scared in Orgo, by the way, Orgo too. So I was scared what that would mean for my, potential ability to get into medical school, of course. That was one instance. And I obviously had to really redeem myself moving forward, show an upward trend that I could still excel in classes despite this failure. Then I got a 505 on my MCAT, which by some is viewed kind of as like an average score. And so I wanted to retake it again to get a better score. I retook it and I got a 505 again. So that was very, discouraging despite all these months of retaking, restudying, all of these things. But I still applied because I trusted that like the rest of my application hopefully would have been strong enough with the upward trend, with the extracurriculars. And then recently in medical school, for those who follow me, they know that I'm open about this as well, but I didn't pass step 1 by 1 to 2 marks. So that was something I had to bounce back from. And, it's still something I'm actively going through. But yeah, failure is like something that I've noticed that every single person goes through during their process. And it's not something that, anyone is not going to go through at some point in their life. It just depends. You have to be really careful with who you follow on social media, who you talk to, because And I completely understand and respect this, but not everyone's going to talk about it publicly. But just know that everyone is going through something, some sort of obstacle, some sort of red flag in their application. And so it's so much more than just your failure. So that's my little thing. I'm happy to answer more questions.
Thank you so much for sharing, Angela, because it's, everyone's gone through challenges, and every single person you ask could have their own situation and story. And it's something that is important to deal with and then to overcome. So thanks for sharing that. And the next question we have here is for Brooke, and it's a combination of a few questions we have here from Thelma and Jennifer, and it's about life balance with studying and, doing the things that you enjoy doing, and just how do you stay sort of mentally well in the process of being a medical student?
Yeah, absolutely. This is so important, and it's going to look different for everyone. And so even though this is it may make sense in hindsight, like really one of my biggest advice to people is to be in tune with what you specifically need. And that can be tricky because that could be not what your friends need, and that's okay. Peer pressure never stops, right? I know a lot of my friends like to go out on the weekends. Your girl needs to sleep. I need 8 hours consistent or I am a mess, right? And so you have to be comfortable prioritizing your needs, because at the end of the day, like, you can't show up for anyone in your life or your friends or anything if you're not prioritizing your own health. And so one of the things I always emphasize is just, really be in tune with what's best for you and not what's best for everyone else, which this can get really mixed on social media, right? Like something could look so good on a reel. It could be so like the perfect video, but if it's not like realistic to you or something that's really hard to apply, then it's good, try things out, right? But don't force anything because that's what looks best. So I guess to answer the question a little bit, for me, definitely therapy has been really important, because it's just hard to even have that balance if you're just so in your head. And so many students, especially with y'all, this anxiety in medical school has been a roller coaster. And so really being able to talk through that out in a safe space is just going to set you up positively for every other aspect of your life, And I think truly the biggest thing about having balance as a medical student is forgiving yourself and not feel guilty when you take a break. Because it's one of those things where you could rest, but if you feel guilty for that rest, it's not going to provide those amazing benefits that it truly can, right? Even recently, my friend was like, oh, I felt like I did nothing, because I was trying to tell her to take a break. And I'm like, feeling like you did nothing and actively doing nothing or self-care are two very different things, And so whatever that looks like for you, and it's kind of typical medical student culture to be like, oh, I feel so guilty, blah, blah, blah. And like unpack that, right? Like we shouldn't be feeling guilty, because again, then it's just a lose-lose. You're not already getting the rested time that you are. And so I kind of hit on different points, but definitely just keep it really personalized, because that's going to go so far. We all need different things, right? Therapy, if that's applicable to you, which I think it is for most people. Oh my gosh, what's my last point? I forgot, but that's the gist.
Thank you so much for that awesome answer. I'm going to keep going down the list here of questions. We have a lot rolling in here. And so Kaylee asks a question. I'll ask you, Zara. What was the adjustment like going from being an undergraduate student to a medical student? And can you talk about some things that you would do to sort of prepare for that transition and make it as easy and smooth as possible?
So honestly, the transition is a little bit hard. I personally didn't do much to prepare. I think the best thing you could do is kind of, mentally prepare yourself. So take a break, go on vacation, do pretty much everything that you want to do before you start, so that you don't really feel like you missed out on anything. So do everything that you need to do to mentally feel prepared. And then kind of just like review your schedule, plan out like important life events or anything that you have going on in the next year at least. And then, just get your supplies ready, get your, I think you should do a little bit of research on different study methods if you don't know what works best for you. I think that was my biggest thing. It took me a few months in medical school to really figure out what worked best for me. And it's okay if you need some time going into in medical school to figure that out. But that's something that you want to figure out beforehand if you can. And then the transition is going to be hard regardless. I think just because there's just so much information once you start. but you'll get it. Like, it's just something that'll take a few weeks and you'll get into it.
Awesome. And also, people are asking questions in the chat as well. And you are all more than welcome to respond to some of those questions if you'd like while we're chatting with these as well. So then the next question I have is for Kinza here. And it comes from an anonymous attendee. But what advice would you give your freshman undergrad self? What would you do if you can go back in this whole process and have a chance to redo it as a freshman?
That's an awesome question. The first thing that came to my mind that I would redo is I entered freshman year of college with the goal that I wanted to go to medical school one day. So I did start like volunteering early on. So definitely try to do that with whatever organization you want to be a part of. If you don't want to volunteer in a hospital, that's okay. Just find some type of organization, pursue some passion of yours through that and start volunteering early. Something I would change though is I thought, like to get into medical school, I had to do a ton of research. I thought I had to get publications in order to get in. So I did treat my resume a little bit like a checklist. I was like, I need to get research. I need to get multiple positions. I need multiple papers. And after doing like 7 years to 8 years of research from the start of college to where I am now, I have definitely discovered that I hate doing research. I didn't enjoy like any of it besides maybe one research position I had in infectious disease. So if I could go back, I would do more clinical work. I would be honest with myself and be like, okay, I really don't enjoy research. So like maybe I could take a course and like become an EMT instead, or, do CNA a little bit more. I had gotten my certification, but I didn't really pursue it as much. So I would change that if I could go back. I wouldn't do all that research. I would have done stuff that I would have enjoyed more.
That's a great answer. And thank you for mentioning that, because making sure you're doing the things you enjoy is important, and you don't want to just be struggling and hating the activities that you're doing, because then you also won't be able to be as passionate about them, and you won't be able to speak to that too.
Something I want to add to, I'm so sorry. People like medical students who did more clinical work were more prepared during medical school than the students that did research. So that's just something I wanted to add in there too.
Okay, awesome. And so another anonymous applicant asked about gap years. And this question is to anyone here on the panel who may or may not have taken a gap year. Was there anyone who did take a gap year, and could you speak to the importance of that or the role that it played in your application?
I can go first. I took one planned gap year and it was the best year of my life. If I can go back in time, I would do it again, if not take another one. For me personally, I entered college very lost. I had no guidance. I mentioned in the chat, I'm first gen everything. So my parents immigrated here from Poland. I had no mentors, no guidance. And so I felt really lost as a pre-med. And it didn't take me until the end of sophomore year to start really working on my application in a way that would like translate for like medical school applications and such. So I knew early on, like end of sophomore year, that I wanted to take a planned gap year. And even then it was still very like taboo. People didn't talk about it. Now it's becoming more and more popular. As I mentioned in the chat, only 5 of my classmates went straight through. It's like a common thing now to do at least one gap year. And it was just really amazing for me personally, because it was a full year where I could just really tackle any gaps or weaknesses in my application, whether that was clinical experience or research or volunteering, anything at all. It happened to be the year of COVID, but I still was able to work full-time clinically, spend so much time with my family, just rest and recharge before starting medical school. Because let me tell you guys, nothing prepares you for medical school more than like rest, recharging, family time, hobbies, building solid habits that you can move forward with. So I took one gap year and it was the best thing ever. And now I'm currently, an unplanned gap year during medical school. So I would just really encourage anyone thinking that they might need more time, or honestly just for fun, I would really recommend it.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Brooke, you had something as well?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna touch base. I did. So I also did a gap year. It was like semi-planned. One of the big recommendations I have. So I actually did like a biostatistics program in like Colorado. Super random, right? One of the approaches to my application was finding things that weren't the most traditional, but ways that were applicable, right? Like biostats, like being able to really read research on like a deep level and just understanding that, I really felt like was a fun way. And like every single one of my interviewers like asked me about that program. And so, or even also kind of, this is kind of just adding on real quick, but I was like an RA on campus. When I tell you that people skills was probably the most applicable thing I did all of undergrad, having to like work with because you have to do like difficult patients and all this other stuff. I had to work in so many uncomfortable social situations. And so just know that there are so many ways to apply. Because again, right, medicine isn't just that experience or the science, but it's working with people, both like your attendings and also patients. And so there's a lot of different ways to extrapolate those skills. But yeah, I did a biostats program. I tried to scribe, it didn't really work out, but I did some other stuff. Actually worked for like a social media agency. And honestly, I was able to kind of like tie things around, but it was definitely a good experience for me.
Awesome. I have a question here, and I want to ask Zara about it. It's something that Brooke actually touched upon a little bit earlier, but Caitlin's asking here, how do you manage self-doubt and anxiety when starting out in medical school and in general? Because, you know, from the time that you're in college and thinking about applying to medical school and the time that you're in medical school, it's, you know, it's a roller coaster in a way. So how do you manage that anxiety that comes along with it and the self-doubt that you might feel at times?
I think that's a really good question. That anxiety and self-doubt, for me personally, it still comes back time to time, especially during third year when you're, you know, really in the hospital and you are around residents and physicians. And it's like, oh my God, do I belong here? Like, am I supposed to be here? But I think you just need to take a deep breath and believe in yourself and tell yourself that you are here for a reason and you deserve to be here. Honestly, that doubt doesn't really go away. You just need to take a deep breath, you know, do what you need to do to really believe in yourself. You know, you're at that point in your career, you're a student. So obviously, you know, it's okay to have gaps in your knowledge. It's okay to, you know, not be at the level of a physician or a resident. So you will feel some things, but you just need to take a deep breath, you know, get yourself together. Keep learning, keep studying, and keep your head high and be confident in everything that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And keeping sort of going along with additional questions, a question for you, Kinza, it's about letters of recommendation. So, you know, of course, to apply, you need your letters of recommendation. And how did you go about, you know, thinking about who you were going to ask and actually collecting those letters?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say during my second year of college into my third year, I started becoming a little bit more intentional about like the relationships I had with my professors. So I knew that I was going to have to ask like multiple for recommendation letters. So I kind of went into it with the mentality that like I need to be this professor's friend. So I picked professors who were just like a little bit more easier to talk to, a bit more welcoming. I really struggled going to office hours for the first 2 years of college. I just thought it was really awkward and I like didn't really have questions. I would usually just do my work with my friends. So I just like ended up going to an office hour one day just to be like, hey, like I'm Kinza. That's pretty much it. Just wanted to introduce myself. And it was really awkward, but like that professor ended up being my mentor like to this day, 8-9 years later. So I highly recommend just like going into an office hour or sending that email out to a professor, introducing yourself, and then just find commonalities, like talk about, I ended up finding research to be something that we had in common. So I would talk to her about research, and just have it in the back of your mind that I need to ask this person for a rec letter at some point. So like what qualities can I show this professor I have? Like what examples can I give this professor of like being a good student with XYZ qualities? I think if you go to the AAMC website, you can find a link. There's a link on there that talks about like what people who are writing your recommendation letters need to write about. So they have like all these qualities listed out, different areas that your writers can highlight about you. So I would recommend going there and looking at that so you can try to talk yourself up to these professors. And just keep it natural, and make sure you tell them like early on. I try to tell my people like at least 6 months ahead of time, because some people will say yes and then they'll end up like not writing it. So you also want to have a couple of backups in mind.
Great. And something we haven't touched on yet, which is very important though, is the MCAT. and we have a few questions about that. So I wanted to ask you, Angela, about the MCAT. So how did you prep for it? And also, if you can go back and sort of change anything about your prep, what would you have done differently?
Definitely. So for me, I remember spending so much time on content review the first time around, like several months, just reading my Kaplan books, highlighting, rewriting the notes, which when you now think about it is just very passive. And while content review is important, I would limit it a little bit more and do more practice style questions, whether that's, I think it was Jack Weston was for cars, AAMC website has great like sample practice Q banks to do and just practice tests, because ultimately that's what the test is going to be, is just a lot of practice. The more you do, the more you learn, the more you can like review your incorrects, learn why you're getting it wrong. And even I know it's intimidating to do practice questions when you feel like you still don't have the material mastered, but I feel like if you just wait until the time you do have the material mastered, you'll never get to the practice questions. And these practice questions are like a way to end up getting, really, really good at a topic, is by just practice, practice, practice. So that's what I would do the second time around. I don't know if anyone else has any input to add.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're definitely gonna get more MCAT questions in there. Thank you for that answer. And Brooke, I wanted to ask you a question that I was seeing here as well, because you've gone through medical school now, and different years are different in terms of how much time you're spending on certain things. Could you go through sort of like an average day in the life at different parts of medical school and like what that really looks like? Because I feel like, we hear that medical school is hard and you're busy, but what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so let me get into it. Obviously, it was impacted by COVID. It was kind of a weird time. And so thinking of pre-clerkship, right? So that's the first part before you're in rotations. Oftentimes there'll be just like lectures in the morning. So you can either go in person depending on your school, or you can like watch them later. The benefit of watching them later is that you can speed them up if that's better for you. But there's definitely something to be said about the structure that in-person lectures provide, or just hearing someone in person. So it's very, preference-based. From there, I felt like my school, like I had anatomy the first semester. So our first semester was like very, very packed. And so it felt like I was basically on campus the whole time. There definitely was like a misery loves company energy, because you just had a lot of allocated areas for your fellow students. And so we'd kind of just work together or work alongside one another. Often would go like watch anatomy videos to prepare a study, go to anatomy lab. We just kind of have random clinical skills. And so day to day, I feel like, I would go to campus. A lot of times I would like bring a lunch and would kind of try and be there all day. It's really preference. I feel like for me, I really like my home space to be like a home space and not a productivity space. Like, for me, it's like, especially with my cats around, I get very like comfortable. So you just need to know yourself. Like maybe that means I felt like most days in pre-clerkship, I would just stay pretty late at the like library with friends. And then weekends, a lot of times I would try and like spice things up by going to like coffee shops. But a lot of times I would go to the library again, also to like save money, because coffee costs money. And so in clerkships, it really just depends on the rotation. I will say I felt like clerkships is one of the hardest times, just because you are there in person and navigating that while also needing to study for shelf exams. And so, oftentimes you were, at the hospital most of the day, and you come home, you kind of have to study. The best time to really ensure that you have some free time is to really front load things as much as possible. You're going to be so tired from the prior rotation that it's really tricky. So a lot of, I feel like, ensuring that you have free time in medical school is kind of like looking into the future and kind of doing things not because you necessarily need to right in this moment, but because you want that peace of mind and free time later on. But there is a silver lining, because fourth year is just kind of like random virtual classes right now, depending on when your sub-Is are. But especially, around this time, at least my school, we kind of just have like a boot camp. We're kind of just going over different topics. And so it's really hard to condense, just because even like I'm thinking of OB-GYN, mine was split up into 3 sections, and so like depending on the week, the day would be completely different, and sometimes you have weekends, sometimes you don't, sometimes you have nights. And so it really is hard to, I feel like, walk through a typical day. But I just felt like, I don't know, I really felt like it was really tricky. And again, that's going to be different for everyone, and a lot of that comes back to my original thing of you need to know what works for you. And because sometimes self-care honestly looks like getting ahead of your studies, so you have that Sunday morning to just like vibe out with some candles and stuff like that, you know. So it can look a little different, but it takes a lot of like thinking ahead. I hope that answered it enough.
Oh, that was a phenomenal answer. Thank you. And there is a question here that I saw about applying to a certain amount of medical schools or to make a list. So Kinza, I wanted to ask you sort of, how did you go about knowing which medical schools to apply to, how many, and like, where did you get your information about the different schools?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know how much I remember, so I will like defer this to someone else. But I remember I applied to 33 medical schools. I applied to both MD and DO programs. And I forget what the website was, but I did filter for like MCAT score averages and GPA averages when I applied. I think maybe going back based on using the strategy I've been using to like apply for residency, maybe I would have talked to like alumni from my college a little bit more and been like, oh, which medical schools did you apply to? Where did you get in? And kind of curate my list on like where I would apply doing that. But if someone else wants to answer, if they remember a little bit better, definitely go ahead.
Yeah, Zara, do you remember how you made your list? Thanks for that answer, Kinza.
I can talk briefly about it. Just like Kinza, I don't remember much. I know a big thing for me was location. So, you know, you want to keep in mind like how close you are to your family, the weather. Some people really like being in the cold versus some people don't. Geography is really important. If you want to be in a big city versus like a more suburban situation, that was something that I considered. And then you also want to look at like the school's mission. The school that I currently go to, they focus a lot on like rural medicine and like giving back to more underserved communities, which I liked. So depending on what school you go to, things like that are different. And some schools have different programs. So you want to look into things like that to see what resonates with you. And kind of see where your ideals line up. And that's kind of just what I looked at.
Awesome. And so now that, you know, once someone's finishing up medical school, they apply to residency, right? And I know this is down the line for a lot of people who are watching, but I know that, Brooke, you mentioned match day and things like that. So I wanted to ask you a question that I saw. Can you just like describe what matching to residency is, or how that match process works for people who may not have really heard about it before?
Yeah, for sure. No, there's so many terms and stuff like that in medicine that like just ask questions, y'all. I think people get so quick to like forget that, you know, these are not normal words. But basically what it means to match is that the like summer of the third year of medical school, you apply to residency programs. So you turn in the application and then you find out if you interview there, you can interview or not interview. And this is all by specialty. So it's going to look different per specialty. So you interview with the different residency programs. And then, oh my goodness, when was I due? March 1st. So just like, you know, end of February, March, you rank the different programs that you interview basically into your preferences. And then basically it goes into the abyss, and there's like a system where they also rank like y'all. And there's something called like SOAP, which is like a supplemental and basically, so next week it's happening. So if everyone's curious, Monday you basically find out, hey, did you match to one of the X number of programs that you ranked, or did you not? And if you didn't, it's called SOAP, which, I mean, if you're not in medical school, this is very far away. And so, you know, you can cross that bridge later. And then, but if you did match, on Friday, we find out where we go. And unlike medical school, unless things have changed, oh my God, I feel so old. You don't get admitted to multiple places, you get admitted to one place. So like you rank your list, you know, they do the algorithm, you get matched with one place, and it's also a contract. So not for like years, but like you're basically, you know, contract to go there. So you get into one place, which is kind of tricky, right? Because it could be kind of like anywhere in the country, for the most part. And so that's kind of the general match program, but it's very, very far away, and like you shouldn't even know your specialty until like your third year. So but that's kind of an overview.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was an awesome overview. Angela, question for you now. And this is like a broad question, and everyone probably has their own answer to this. But like, again, medical school is very hard, but what would you say the hardest part is? Like, what does that really mean that medical school is hard? Is it like the amount of time that you're studying it? Is it the content? Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah, definitely. So this is something I wondered for the longest time when people would say medical school is so hard. I'm like, what does that actually mean? Because thousands of people go through it every year. And so while I think the hardest part is just how much information you're learning at once. And also, God forbid, if you're going through something externally in your life, like the health of a loved one, your own mental health, something's happening in your life, because life does not pause when you're in medical school. Balancing that with medical school is the hardest part, in my opinion. It's not the information. The information that you're learning is not necessarily hard. It's a lot of it, but it's manageable. We all do it. We learn it. Somehow it sticks. But it's just balancing, like, if there's other stuff that needs your attention more, then it becomes really hard to do everything at once, because in medical school, it's like every single day there's so much, and it's so easy to fall behind. Even when you start early or you try to get ahead, you're still behind. That's how it always feels. It's like, you'll probably hear the quote, it's like drinking out of a fire hose or water hose, whatever. That's very true. But the material is not actually hard, because everything you're learning is directly relevant to things that you're going to be seeing in the clinical setting. So it's really interesting. I really love the material, but it's just a lot. And especially if there's stuff going on externally.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot. There's a lot of content in medicine, and this is just, we have to learn about it all. So you only really have so many years to do that. And so, Kins, a question for you in general, when you were in the process of applying, what did you feel like were the most important things on your application? You mentioned sort of like a checklist in a way, but was there something that was brought up in interviews a lot? Was there something, like, whether it was research or clinicals, that you felt really sort of made you stand out as a candidate?
Yeah, I think for me, research helped me stand out the most as a candidate. And I actually, for one of my interviews, and this is actually for the med school that I got admitted into, I had printed out a kind of a diagram about my favorite research position, which was the infectious disease one. And I kind of like, a lot of, if you do research, it will come up during your interviews and they'll ask you like, oh, what did you do during this research position? So basically the diagram I made was just a really simplified version of like what our whole research project was about. And it was visual and like it was colorful, and I printed it out and I gave it to them. And I was like, oh, here's like a diagram that I made about my research as I talked about it, so they could follow along. And I think that really helped them stay more engaged and like not just go into dreamland while I was talking, like forget what I was talking about and zone out. I really think that helped the most. They were really impressed with that diagram. And I do think that helped me get admitted just based on like their feedback I got after. So I would say that is what came up the most during my interviews and how I created like a lasting impression.
Yeah, wow, good point. Because that lasting impression, it makes a difference, because these interviewers are interviewing a lot of candidates like all back to back to back. So you want to be able to stand out. And speaking of standing out, Maria's asking a question that I want to ask Zara. It's about personal statements, and how do you go about writing it, and what tips do you have to make sure you have sort of like an impactful personal statement that people will remember?
That's a great question. I think writing my personal statement was something that I really struggled with. I had drafts and drafts and drafts. I had to have so many friends come and read it for me. And I think that's like kind of the process that you do want to go through. You should have multiple drafts. You should go to people and have them read it and, get different perspectives, because you might think that something sounds great, and it might, but to someone else, it might not be as great. So you do want to get different perspectives, because you don't know who the person reading it is, and you don't know what they'll think of it, right? So to make it good, I think you should try to find an experience that really resonates with you, because if you are passionate about it, it'll show in the way that you write about it. So that's really important. And you want to find something, that's a little bit more unique. There's ways to make common, general ideas more unique. So that's something that you want to do. I really like the concept of telling it like a story. You want to have like a really interesting hook and kind of get the reader really interested in what you're going to talk about. And then at the end, you kind of just want to tie everything back together and, bring it back to you and how this is relevant to you. So it's a process. Take your time with it. Get the help that you need. Many universities have writing centers. So I would look into that as well.
Thank you for that answer. Brooke, I have a question here that's being asked by Dakai about what's something you wish someone would have told you before you pursued a career in medicine, right? Because it's sort of like this long journey. And at some point we say, okay, we're doing it. We're applying to medical school. We want to become doctors. What's something you wish someone would have told you beforehand?
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. I think it's important. I wish someone would have, maybe told me to really break down your why of medicine, like the different characteristics of it. And even then it's like, you want to work with patients, right? Okay, what does that mean? Do you want to be connected to people? Do you want to talk one-on-one? Do you want to serve people? Like, even then, I would really break it down to its skeleton and make sure that you're exploring potential other careers that could fulfill that criteria. Because at the end of the day, I think it would be ignorant to ignore this kind of like, yeah, sometimes social media paints it negatively, but at the end of the day, like as a whole in society, I feel like going into medicine is something very, renowned and like looked up to, and it would be ignorant to think that that is not impacting all of us and having us have this bias one way or the other. And so I think it's important with a career like this to be extra intentional that you're exploring your other options, and also be sure to like kind of think about the trajectory of what things will look like financially, right? And so medicine, unlike some other fields, is that if you get to kind of that 4th year point and you realize then that maybe it's not for you, you might be so deep in debt that it might feel like you don't have any other option but to move forward. And I say this to be a realist, because honestly, right now in 4th year, they're like telling us all these things where I'm like, I feel like y'all should have told us this like before starting, and it feels a little sneaky, but maybe that's just me. And so just be mindful of that. Think about the trajectory, right? Like, it seems kind of like a decision in the moment, but this is something that you're committing to. And like, yes, in theory, you can leave it, right? But if you are so, ingrained, if you're so in debt, it's really not going to feel like an option to leave it. And so I say that just to say, just to be extra sure and to make sure you're being in touch with that positive bias that many of us in society have. Other than that, I think just kind of, I wish someone maybe would have told me kind of to me, I thought one of the most challenging parts is really navigating socially, especially when it comes to attendings and like fellows and residents, especially because if y'all didn't know, like on rotations, like every 3 days you could have a different person like monitoring you or determining stuff. And that's really hard, like emotionally to navigate if you have like any ounce of like social anxiety, I feel like. And so I wish like that would have been talked about a little bit more and maybe like more skills for it. But those are some things that come to mind.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was really thorough. And I think the fact that all of you, for the audience that's listening, the fact that all of you are here and listening to these stories, it really helps because you're getting that perspective of people who are in medical school. And so hearing that early on is very valuable. And 2 people back to back asked the question about imposter syndrome that I want to throw to Angela. CJ and Sarah both asked about imposter syndrome. Do you ever feel it? How do you deal with it? Because, it sort of sometimes feels in medical school like we're just imposters and we don't belong here.
Yeah, I was about to chat the person in the chat saying like, once you know, let me know. But I was shadowing recently a physician that I really look up to, and they told me that they still feel imposter syndrome to that day. And that really opened up my eyes because I was like, wow, this feeling just never goes away. I remember when I was applying to medical school, I felt like I wasn't good enough. Then when I got the interview, I didn't feel like I belonged. Then even in medical school, you're surrounded by so many intelligent people and you're like, wow, like I'm not like these people. I don't deserve to be here. All of these things, all these thoughts cross your mind, but you have to just keep remembering that the program saw you, saw your application, saw who you are, and that you deserve to be in that program just like anyone else. And another trap we really fall into, like throughout our pre-med and medical journey, is like we always look at our happiness and success and accomplishments as like the next step. So for example, right now you might be like, I'll feel happier, better about myself once I get a medical school interview, or once I get the acceptance. And then once you're first year, like once I'm on second year and done with STEP. And then once you're at that point, you're going to be like, once I'm on rotations and residency, and it keeps going on and on and on. And I feel like we just have to stop in the moment and just remember that you are currently living in a time that you once were wishing and dreaming and praying for. So the feeling is not going to go away. We're never going to feel like we're doing enough. I think that's already something I'm starting to notice, is like, no matter what part of the process I'm in, I'm always feeling like there's more I should be doing. And so I think just accepting that that's like a feeling that's not going away, because when you think about it, once you're successful attending and working with your colleagues, there's always going to be people who are doing more than you, or people who you view as superior. So just like remind yourself that everyone feels it, even if they're not talking about it, if they're not portraying that, everyone feels it. So that's my answer.
Yeah, even now in residency, I'm feeling a lot of imposter syndrome, and I see it every single day when I go to work. Of people are, it's a lifelong learning career, right? Everyone says that, but you're always learning something new every day with every patient. So thank you for that answer, Angela. Akinza, a question for you about somebody here mentioned, they're in high school. And so what advice do you give to a high schooler who may already know that they want to become a doctor? Right? Like, it may be early and some people decide in college or later on too. But if you're a high schooler who already knows you want to be a doctor, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, I think in that situation, I knew in high school that like I was thinking of that career path. So the college that I chose was really important. I was never someone who like did really well on standardized exams. I didn't have a high GPA in high school. So I knew that when I went to college, I was like, the one thing I really need is like a decent GPA if I'm going to apply to med school. So that was my goal. So I chose a college where I felt like I could excel academically. It was somewhat near home. It was in the city. It wasn't too like academically challenging, based on like talking to peers. And so I went with that medical school also because it was around a lot of different hospitals in Boston. So I knew that if I wanted to get into volunteering, research, any type of clinical work, it was in walking distance for me. So hospitals were really accessible in the area. And then it was close to home. So family and like my support systems were nearby as well. So if you're in high school, like I thought about college a lot, like where I should go, where I can perform well academically and get a good GPA. I think that should be on your mind because it does matter.
Thanks. Awesome. And Zara, a question for you here about shadowing from way back earlier, but I found a question here about shadowing. And could you talk about your experience with shadowing? Did you shadow? How much? How'd you find your opportunities? And is, with now, in COVID and changing sort of landscape of these opportunities, is virtual shadowing okay, do you think?
So that's a really good question. I have not done any virtual shadowing, and I don't know enough on that to speak about it. One thing I would recommend is that I do think that being in the clinical setting in person is an experience that you really, really, really should have before going into medical school. A lot of times the situations that we see on TV or like what you might have in your head about medicine might be very different from what it is like in clinic or like in the hospital. So in terms of shadowing, I started off working with a psychiatrist, and then I did some family medicine. I was a volunteer scribe at an underserved clinic. And then I worked with a physical therapist, which is kind of not in the physician category, but it was still a really, really great experience. So that's one thing I would recommend. You don't have to limit yourself to physicians. There are other fields in healthcare, and that's a good way to get in your clinical hours as well. And you do get to see like a different side of medicine from a different like career perspective. I do think you should work with physicians though. It's a great experience to have, and you do learn a lot, and it's a good connection to make, and you really get to solidify if that's what you want to do versus other career paths. And I think I want to say I did close to like, I'm not sure how many hours. I want to say maybe like 200, 300, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't really remember that well.
All right, awesome, thanks. And during our previous session, we talked with the admissions deans about like numbers and amount of hours and things. So it's very variable, and there's really no specific cutoffs anyone looks for. It's just you want to make sure that you're getting a chance to see what it's like to be an actual doctor and deal with patients, because that's something that you can talk about in interviews and really helps make the decision of, do you want to be doing this? And so about kind of picking a field specifically, Angela, you mentioned that there were a few fields that or specialties you were considering. How do you figure out what specialty you're interested in, and when do you have to do that?
Great question. So I went in to medical school thinking it was going to be 100% neurology because I was a neuroscience major in undergrad. Everything I did was neuro related, so it felt comfortable to me. And then when I was shadowing, so something that medical schools have, which is really, really awesome, is different sorts of mentorship or shadowing programs. So we have a thing called Explore, where we get paired with any specialty physician that we want, and we get to just shadow them. So I got to experience ENT and OB-GYN, and I was like, wow, I think I really like something surgical. And so that's where my dilemma started setting in, because that was like all I knew. And then in my gap year, I worked as a medical assistant in OB-GYN. So that opened up a different door for me. I think the best way is through shadowing, figuring out what it is that you want to do, but also just letting yourself follow your interests, and it will take you down a certain path. The best advice that I received, because right now I'm still not set on a specialty until I go through rotations, but the best advice that I received was, first of all, figure out if you want something surgical or not, because that will eliminate a lot of options for you. And second of all, instead of thinking what it is that you want to do, think about what it is that you're okay with never doing again. That really changed my perspective, because oftentimes you'll see, like, let's say you like children, like there's a lot of different specialties where you can take care of children, but think of like, are you okay with never delivering babies again? If that answer is no, then like OB-GYN is something that you want to consider. So yeah, I feel like just talking to mentors, shadowing, that's like the best way. So for me, I am really interested in OB-GYN, so that's what I've been following, but I'm very open to see what ends up calling my name in rotations.
Yeah, that's great. And so we talked a lot about sort of the difficult parts of medical school, but I want to flip that now. And Lavisa asked a question that I want to direct to Brooke. What are some things you love about being a medical student? What's been your favorite part of this whole journey?
Yeah, I was actually just typing about that, so perfect timing. One of the things I love, and this just kind of shows I'm just like very people focused, is getting the chance to experience such raw and real moments with people that you just never would have had a chance to. You get to work with patients during some of the most stressful and heartbreaking times of their entire lives. And I feel like that's something that I will always be so grateful for, or even just experiencing, having such close relationships with folks experiencing homelessness or, psychosis, like so many things that until you get to actually experience, like it will never, it's completely different, right? Like I even remember, so many talks about, gun policies, right? I was in trauma surgery in the OR of someone who just got shot. And like, I would just remember just like this overwhelming sensation of, just like this honor and this privilege of being able to see such, things that happen at the end of the day, all day, every day, but getting such a breath of it and experiencing so many different things has just been so, I don't know, that to me is just completely priceless. In addition, I think just learning those skills again to make someone feel comforted, to feel seen. Again, I'm a very big softie. Like that to me, I take all that stuff and apply it to my real life because, everyone wants to feel heard, their problems, right? And so I think for me, it really has been the human experience, being passionate about public health. I just think having those real life experiences with folks, is just really valuable when considering just all the different issues going on in this world, right? So that's some thoughts. And then, just also like, again, I think the human body is just absolutely phenomenal and just so beautiful and majestic, and just like I'm not interested in surgery, but like being in surgery, like I'm like, I know what everyone's like insides look like what, like, you know what I mean? Like the body's just doing all these amazing things at once, just on its own. I think in society, you know, we focus so much on what we look like, but like all of us right now, our bodies are doing so many endless things, and learning about that, I feel like can make you just like appreciate and just be in awe of the body in such a new way. Also childbirth, that happens all the time, but seeing it, you're just like, wow, magical. So those are some of my takeaways, kind of fluffy, but that's who I am.
Yeah, that's great. Zara, a question that Dakai asks here in the chat is about major misconceptions about medicine or med school. So what's something that you feel like people get wrong about medical school? What do people think it's like versus what is it actually like? Have you experienced anything along those lines?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people expect you to like eat, sleep, breathe medicine. And for me personally, that was not true. Although you are in, you know, you are studying a lot, you are doing a lot. It's not like that. You do have time to go hang out with your friends, spend time with your family, you know, take a little trip on a winter break or something. So I think that's just like a really big misconception, especially on social media. People will show themselves like getting up at 5 a.m., not getting home until like 10 p.m., just studying. And it's not like that at all. You just need to, you know, study smart, not hard, figure out what works for you, and just, you know, manage your time well to make the most of it.
And that's a great answer. And speaking of social media and things, obviously, we have 10 minutes left. So I know there's a lot of questions that will go unanswered, unfortunately, just based on the time restrictions. But you can get in touch with any of our 4 awesome panelists here at their social media accounts. I want to go over them actually now and then go into questions for the next 10 minutes, just so we make sure we mention that. Kinza, how can people get in contact with you? And then I'll go person by person.
Yeah, my Instagram is a great way. I try my best to respond to every person. So my handle's right here as my name, at Kinza J Hussein.
Thanks. And Zara?
Yeah, so my Instagram would also be a great way to get to me. I try to respond to DMs as best as I can, and I'll drop my username in the chat. It's almost Dr. Zara.
Thank you. And Brooke?
Yeah, so just like everyone else, my name is on here, Beats by Brooke. Instagram's the best way. If I throw you a voice message, don't be surprised. I like talking and not texting.
And Angela?
I would say I'm also active on Instagram. You can DM me, and I'm also happy to set up a phone call with you if like you feel like there's something that I said that resonated in a way that I can be helpful. I have 2 more months left of my leave of absence. So I have a lot of free time. So you can just message me whenever, and I put my handle in the chat for you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. So getting a little bit more into questions, something we didn't touch upon yet is interviews. And the interview process can be very intimidating. And there's also different kind of interviews. Angela, do you want to talk a little bit about what the interview process for med school was like for you?
Yes. So for me, I just wanted to say, just to be completely transparent, I had 1 interview, so I can just speak on that briefly. And then if there's someone else who had like more styles, feel free to say anything you want. For mine, it was, I really liked my interview because they were really trying to get to know you as a person. It wasn't MMI, it was like your traditional one. I had 2 one-on-one interviews, and they were more conversational. But I remember feeling super nervous, and I found that Student Doctor Network for like specific interviews was very helpful because they put like past questions. So like if you just look up SDN interview questions and then the program. So yeah, but I do want to say one thing of encouragement. My first interview did not come until the end of January. And so at that point I was like, thinking about having to reapply. And I was coming to terms with that possibility. And then, so I just wanted to shed some encouragement. Like if you are not getting an interview in August, September, like you are seeing some people on social media, just trust that your timing will come. And then the program that you're meant to end up with will see you for you, and you'll get that acceptance when it's meant for you. So yeah, my interview came later, but you know, I still got in. So I think just trust the process and it'll be okay.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And now, so sticking to that same question, to any of our 3 additional panelists, did any of you have an MMI interview? And if so, what was that like? Brooke, do you want to say?
Yeah, I had one MMI. It's been like 4 years. There is a book I read that someone recommended, so I will post it on my stories whenever I find it. But it was, I mean, so much of that was really just keeping yourself calm, because the definition of them is that there is no like perfect answer. I do really recommend, reading either this book or some other book. I mean, again, it's been 4 years, so there's probably better books out now, but a lot of them can really give you like a structure to follow, and it can really take away that anxiety. I do feel like I am like good at interviewing, but I always feel like you can do like a little more structured version of yourself sometimes. And so I think it's really important to balance that structure while still keeping things personal. And so yeah, it was just it's just very odd. And that's why preparing or really understanding what you're getting into, so at least there's already going to be so many things you can't control, i.e. the questions and situations that you're going to be asked, and so try and control everything you can, and I think that can help a little bit with the anxiety. Additionally, I think one of them I had to turn in like a virtual question, like videoing myself. I don't know if they're like doing that more or less now. That was just odd, but that's why it's really good to practice and just really have, running lists of some of your experiences that might talk about certain like attributes about you, so you really have them in like your back pocket, like literally or figuratively. And then one other interview style is a group. So I did this once, I think for medical school, once for residencies, when they have you do like an activity together. And I think it's kind of typical, but yeah, it's like, make sure, because everyone talks, right? And it's important to talk, but I also always made sure to go out of my way. If someone hadn't talked for a little bit, I'd be like, hey, what's your thoughts on this? Or like, did we miss anything? And so just making sure that, again, like, yes, you want to be heard, but you also, the whole point is to show you work with other people. Yeah.
True. And so, yeah, that MMI or multiple mini interviews becoming more popular of a format to sort of learn about a candidate from a medical school's perspective, because it's very different from just doing like a sit down 30-minute interview. So preparing for that is super important, and you want to go into it and sort of like know what to expect in a way. We have 5 more minutes to go. I have a question for you, Zara, and then after that, I'm going to ask a question for everybody. So for you, Zara, do you feel like college or medical school are more enjoyable, and sort of why do you say that?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Honestly, I've had a really, really great medical school experience. I think it's kind of like that misery loves company, where there's all of us kind of really come together. My class is very collaborative, not competitive. So it's just so nice when everyone kind of comes together. We're like in the libraries, like at midnight, studying the night before an exam. And there's just so much like, it's so fun. Like we have a lot of good times. And then after the exam, everyone kind of goes out and celebrates together. There's a really nice sense of unity. And I truly believe I've found some lifelong friends from medical school. So that's one aspect of it. And then I think just the whole aspect of medical school is a lot more rewarding, especially on rotations. You kind of see things coming into fruition, right? When you're helping someone out, you kind of see results of that. So it's just a lot more rewarding, both in like a friend way and then also like in a career way.
Great. And now I just want to ask the last question, and I'll give everybody a chance to answer, because I think this is, an opportunity for you to say sort of from your perspective what you would recommend. So for all of the pre-meds who are listening, starting with you, Kinza, what is the single biggest piece of advice that you'd recommend or you'd give to the pre-meds who are listening right now to this panel?
My advice is actually kind of similar to something Angela said. I tell this to everyone. You have to really enjoy the journey. Like today, you have to enjoy today. Tomorrow, you have to enjoy tomorrow. You really can't live for everything will be fine once I'm a medical student, or everything will be better once I'm an attending. I had a roommate actually in med school who would say that all the time. She was like, oh, I can't wait till this is over and I'm just an attending. Then like everything will be fine. That's like 8 years away when you start medical school. So like you really just got to enjoy the moment. I definitely didn't enjoy studying for the MCAT, but like looking back, similar to what Zara said, you really do enjoy like studying. I kind of miss it. Like I'm a 4th year right now and I have nothing to do besides wait for match. I know Brooke's like making a face, but I do kind of I enjoyed studying with my friends. It was fun. Like you do stay up late in the library with everyone and you like mess around and study and you'll enjoy it. So just remember that. Enjoy the day to day.
Awesome. And Angela next for the same question.
I would say for me, if there's a dream program or something that a school that you really want to get into, find a way to get involved in that program, whether that's shadowing, whether that's over the summer to volunteer, anything. I think that makes a really big difference, just showing interest in a program if that's somewhere you really want to be. But another thing I wanted to just quickly add is just remember to be your own biggest advocate and mentor. Seek out people whose advice you trust, people who know you. At the end of the day, you have to pave your own path. No one is going to be cheering for your success harder and louder than you, especially if you're first gen or a minority or any sort of person who, doesn't have the resources or the privilege necessarily. Make sure you find people who you trust who are in your corner. And as with everything in life, quality over quantity, be your own biggest cheerleader and advocate and just like trust that everything will, unwind the way it's supposed to be in the end.
Yeah, and Brooke?
Yeah, so definitely recommend really prioritizing your own health and wellness. It's really easy, especially in this culture of like go, 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 like especially pre-meds, right? Even joking about how little you sleep. That's not funny. You need to sleep. Like it's good for your learning. It's good for your mental health. And I think that core foundation is so important. And like ironically, that can get lost in medical school because it's not always prioritized depending on where you go. And I think that's going to set you up, for success in all elements. Because if you're, just because that also impacts your mental health, right? If you're in a better headspace, I feel like you're going to make more decisions that align. And kind of similar to Angela, be really intentional about your support system and like give yourself credit. Like I think when we move forward so fast, and then even myself, I've recognized this, like it's so easy to look back and not truly like give yourself that like quality pat on the back for everything you've done. Like you need to find ways to be like have that pride and have that like acknowledgement, or it's just going to eat at you because you're only going to be focusing on what you're doing wrong. And that's like no way to live.
Yeah, true. And last but not least, Sarah.
So mine's kind of a mix of what everyone said, but you don't want to be pouring out of an empty cup. So make sure that you're pouring time, energy, effort into yourself, take care of yourself, do what you need to do, take a break when you need to, or your body will force you to take a break. You don't want that. And you also just really want to be confident in yourself and believe in yourself because you have made it so far for a reason and you'll keep making it far. Just believe in yourself and be confident.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of our panelists, Kinsa, Sarah, Brooke, Angela. You guys are awesome. And I know that, the people who are listening really benefited from hearing your perspectives. And also, I'm sure that they're going to be reaching out to you as well on social media and direct messaging you with additional questions. So we appreciate all of your time and all of your help that you're giving.
All right. Thank you all so much for being here. All of our medical student panelists, you were wonderful. This was such a fun and informative session. And thank you to everyone in the audience for choosing to spend your Saturday here with us. I sincerely hope that this event was really fun and engaging and that you were able to learn a lot of valuable information about the medical school application process, the MCAT, what it's like to be a medical student, etc. And I myself am a first generation medical student. So this is an event that was really, really dear to my heart. And I'm so grateful to everyone who helped me put this all together. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. We had Prospective Doctor, Global Medical Brigades, and Med School Coach. All three of these organizations offered some really incredible resources for you guys. So please go check them out if you haven't already. And then a couple of people asked where the recording is going to be. It's going to be on the website. So I have it linked in my Instagram bio if you don't have it. But we will be posting the recording there in a couple of days once we get it edited together. So it will be free there for you to access. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate you all.
Thank you for having us.